Today I want to share some ideas with you about improvisation and soloing, and specifically one approach that you can use to create better phrases in your solos. It's a four-part phrasing idea, and I introduced it in my last video, but I want to dive into it a little bit deeper because it's very powerful and I think it could help you build more coherent, better solos. If you take a four-part structure and you think about your phrase being about 4 measures long, or 8 measures. You can do it at different lengths, but the idea is this. You start with a simple musical idea, also called a motif. You develop that idea in step 2. So you repeat the motif, but change it slightly by changing the direction you're moving in or the notes you're playing. The third step would be to extend the motif, so repeating something that's similar or the same rhythm, but then extending it by adding more movement, more notes, or more directional changes. And then step 4 is the resolution. You resolve it by playing. You can play the same rhythmic idea, or you can change up the rhythmic idea, but what you want to do in this fourth step to kind of complete the phrase is to find a strong resolution by landing on, say, the root note, or some other chord tone that feels like it's resolved. So I want to provide you with some examples to help illustrate this idea a little bit better, and then at the end of this video I've got a practice solo that's 16 bars long that I wrote over just a basic G7 kind of funk blues pattern, and it's a way that I thought if you want to take an extra step and actually learn this solo, it could help demonstrate this idea to you. And in the solo I use single note lines as well as a chordal idea so that you can see how you could use this to incorporate the same concept to incorporate your chordal ideas into a soloing framework. So I'm going to start by giving some examples of how I use this idea, and then I'm going to show you the practice solo that I came up with. So if you want to stick around till the end, I will be going through all of that. But to start, step 1 is just to state a clear musical idea, and that can be anything, but it's best to keep it very simple when you're first starting this, using this concept. So think very rhythmically when you're doing this. You want to not have too many notes so that you don't lose the idea, kind of the continuity of the rhythm that you're playing. And here is one example from the practice solo later. So it's 1 measure long, like 4 beats, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I've left a little bit of space at the end of the phrase, or at the end of this motif, so that I can jump into the second part of the phrase with a fresh kind of start. I can build on that idea. Keep it simple when you begin so that you can iterate. You can always make it more complex as you go through a solo. So then the second step is to develop the idea. And usually what you'd want to do is start kind of the same way. It doesn't have to be the same note, but it could be the same note, but you really want to keep that rhythmic coherence, so keeping the same kind of starting rhythm. So I'm going to show the second part of the first phrase from the practice solo later, in which I keep the same note and same rhythm that I started the first part with. So that would be part 2, but notice how I developed it a little bit. Part 1. And you can hear that coherence. It sounds like I'm weaving in a coherent idea together that can help me move forward in my solo. This will help so that you're not having to come up with new ideas every measure for the entire solo. It makes it sound coherent, and it's actually easier for the audience to connect with what you're playing. It really creates a more melodic, kind of lyrical way of playing. You can develop in step 2 by starting the same, but then changing the ending, moving in a different direction at the end of the phrase. You can start on a different note if you want, but keep the rhythm and kind of the direction the same if you want. There's many ways to do this, but keeping the rhythm at the beginning the same and then changing the direction at the end is a great way to approach this. Step 3 is to extend the idea. And what I mean by that is start in a very similar way, keeping that same motif so that it's cohesive with your previous 2 steps, and then extend it by adding some more movement. Here's an example from the practice solo later. That's step 1. Step 2. And I extended the idea by doing a couple things. I moved higher up in the scale. I added some motion. It's really the same rhythm as step 2, but now I've just changed the direction and I've extended it a little further. So it still has coherence, but it is feeling like I'm moving forward in time and progressing. So then to close out that phrase, I go like this. And here, I've done a couple things. I started on a different note, but with the same rhythm. So each of these 4 parts of the phrase starts with that exact same rhythm. It's just a simple. But this time on step 4, to do my resolution, I started from the 5th and then went down from there, resolving to the root note, which is a very strong resolution point. And you don't always have to resolve to the root note. You can resolve to other strong notes. Good choices would be the 3rd or the 5th. Or if you wanted to have a more surprising kind of sound, you could resolve to a non-chord tone like the 2nd or the 7th of the scale. Oftentimes what that does is build some tension for allowing you to move into the next phrase and resolve that tension. Because remember, soloing and music is really just about building tension and then providing resolution to that tension. And that's a great way to think about soloing and improvisation and composition and all of these related concepts. If I take that concept and I apply it to a different scale, a different chord, I can show you some more examples. So if I go here to a B flat minor chord, B flat minor 7, and I just use a simple pentatonic scale, I'll improvise a full 4-part phrase for you on that. So and every note of that was the pentatonic scale except for one. This one, I went down to the 2nd. But you can see how the phrase has a coherence to it. I'm starting at the root note, and I'm using a rhythm that I can repeat. I'm leaving a little bit of space in between each of the steps of the phrase or the parts of the phrase, and then I'm extending it in the 3rd part and then resolving it in the 4th part. I'll show you another one that doesn't start from the root note, something a little more interesting. Let's see. 3, 4. Again, I'm using almost exclusively the pentatonic scale, but I extended the motif in the 3rd phrase actually by changing the rhythm slightly. And the 3rd, not the 3rd phrase, but the 3rd part of the phrase. So the 3rd part of the phrase is a good place to do something a little bit different, and that can add some variation, some interesting sounding nuance to what you're playing. I'll show you a couple more examples before we get into the practice solo, but you can also extend the phrases to make them a little more complex. You can do that by making 2 measures for each part of the phrase. So the whole phrase together would be like an 8-measure phrase. So I'll show you how I might do that over a C major 7 chord. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So that one is a little more complex. The parts of the phrase are each longer, they're two measures, but they still have a coherence because I'm following my inspiration and following a similar pattern to what I had done before in each of the other parts. So I stated an idea, I develop the idea, I extend the idea, and then I resolve the idea. And you can do this over and over throughout a solo in order to make it the length that your solo is going to be. Let's say you've got a short solo, maybe 8 bars, in a song that has vocals or something. That would be a great place to do this just once or twice so that you have a coherent, melodic, lyrical solo that fits the space really nicely. If you're taking a much longer solo, you might want to extend the ideas much further, so you'd want to start simpler so that you'd have somewhere to go. But you can have many peaks and troughs in a long solo where you build the intensity, you let it back for a minute, you build it back up, and then you let it back down again, and you build to your climax, and then you kind of ride down. Sometimes you might have a solo that lasts 2 to 3 minutes, and you don't want to run out of ideas. The good news is that if you do run out of ideas, just come back to this simple framework of state a motif, develop it, extend it, and then resolve it. And it'll get your creative energy flowing in the right direction to create melodic and interesting ideas. There's 2 real ways that you can maintain coherence through the parts of your phrases. The first, as I mentioned before, is rhythmic coherence. So continuing the same rhythmic pattern through the parts of your phrases to give it that coherence. Another way you can do that is just through the notes, even if you're using different rhythms. There's more ways to do it. One would be patterning in similar ways through your phrases, such as using intervallic leaps like thirds to create a coherence that's not exactly just a rhythmic coherence or the exact same notes, but you're using the same type of movement. That also creates a nice coherence. Here's an example of that over a C major. So in that phrase, I was going a little more out and not sticking so closely to my rhythmic idea, but more using those thirds, that little intervallic jump, in order to create a coherence in my phrase. That's another way that you can do it. You can also do this on more complicated chords and chord patterns like non-diatonic chords or just chord progressions that are even diatonic, but outlining the chords. We're not going to look at any of the chord progressions in this video because that's kind of outside of the scope of what I want to do here. But know that you can phrase your way through chord changes to make coherent ideas over difficult chords. It's a great way to find your way through difficult changes, even simple changes. If you're outlining the chords and using motific development through chord changes, that's a great way to create coherent phrases. So I'll show you one more example over a more kind of dense chord. This is an A flat, major 7, sharp 11. So I'm going to do, again, 2 measures per part of the 4-part phrase. So here we go, 3, 4. So that's sounded pretty to me. I'm trying to demonstrate how this concept scales from very simple to very complex ideas. Even though that wasn't super complex, it's more complex because they're longer parts of the phrase. It's a longer phrase overall, and the chord was more dense and kind of colorful. So that's just another example of how I might use that. Before I get into walking through the practice solo that I've got, which I also have some practice along videos at two different speeds coming up after I walk you through this. Those are at the end of this video. I just want to read you a couple of quotes from a book that I've been reading about improvisation. I've been looking for books that talk about improvisation in different ways to help me come up with better ideas of how to explain improvisation and how to teach it. And so these couple of quotes I want to read you I thought were relevant and helpful. So the book is called Free Play, Improvisation in Life and Art, and it's by Stephen Nachmanovich. I don't know how to say his name. Maybe he's Russian. Kind of sounds like it. But he had some really interesting concepts. This book is not exactly all about music, though he is a musician and does a lot of improvisational music. So it applies not only to music, but to art and really everything in life, because improvisation is all around us in our lives. When we're speaking to someone, we're improvising. When we're, working on a project, we're constantly improvising in different ways. And so if you can bring some of that improvisational spirit that you have from the rest of your life into music, this is a very good way for you to think about it. It's that you're always improvising, and when you get to your guitar, don't let it yourself blank out on ideas. Use your technical ability to come up with phrases and ideas that express yourself. It's about creativity and self-expression. So this was an interesting quote. It is, he says, "As a stone is to a sculptor, so time is to a musician." I think this is very important to understand. I think it underlines the importance of rhythm, because time in music is called rhythm, and we're dealing with patterns of sound over the passing of time. And so if you think about, as a musician, your medium is time, just like a painter's medium is paint and a canvas, or a sculptor, in this example, has a stone and they chisel away at the stone to reveal the art inside of it. We're dealing with music. So we are moving through time, creating patterns in order to convey meaning. And that's where the expression part comes into it. So I thought that was really, really helpful. The other quote I wanted to read you, I think, is super insightful for anyone involved in any type of art form, whether it's from martial arts to visual arts to sonic arts like music. This is extremely important. So it says, "To do anything artistically, you have to acquire technique, but you create through your technique and not with it." That is very important to remember, because when you're learning an instrument, just like when you're learning to play a sport, or you're learning to draw or paint, you have to practice techniques, because without them, you don't know how to make sound on a guitar. Let's say you have to practice your scales. You have to know how to pick the right strings and put your fingers in the right places. That's very important. But that is not what creating art is about. It's not about playing your scales. It's about using your technique in order to create. So the technique is not an end in itself. You create through your technique. So because I've practiced a lot of scales over the years, I have tools that I can call upon when I'm improvising. And so I think that quote, for me, points to the importance of technique, but also shows the limits of technique. You can't become a great soloist by just practicing technical patterns. You have to learn how to apply those patterns in a musical way to create art and to express your ideas, which is what I'm really hoping to be able to do, is to help you express your own ideas in whatever level, whatever way is right for you. Not everybody has the same technical abilities, and at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. It matters what you do with those. If you have limited knowledge of the patterns of the guitar, that's okay. Learn to be creative with what you have. Always push your technique further, but be creative with what you have. And so just to kind of go back to it, we create through our technique, not with the technique. Okay, so I'm going to just quickly, I'm going to try to do it quickly, go through this practice solo that I've written for you, and I hope that you'll grab your guitar, follow along, and try to practice this. I've got, like I said, 2 different speeds of a practice along workout after this that you can use to, practice this solo. And the solo is really demonstrating this concept we were talking about today, the 4-part phrasing of state a motif, develop, extend, and resolve. And so it's 16 bars long, so I've done 4 different phrases. The first 3 are all using single notes. The 4th one is a chordal idea, like a chord soloing idea, which I think is a really great thing to practice because you always want to make contrast in your solos, especially when you're taking longer solos. Adding chordal sections where you're soloing with chords is a great way to add some contrast and to make your solos more interesting as you go along through a lengthy solo. So the first phrase of this practice solo is very simple. It's going to be based on this chord shape here, a little G major triad on the first 4 strings using basically just a pentatonic scale or a G blues scale, major blues, where you have the addition of the note that's between the 2nd and the 3rd, the flat 3, to create a little bit of a bluesy sound. So here it is. So a couple of things to note. There's some anticipation. You can see on the tablature and on the sheet music, the first note of the second part of the phrase and the third part of the phrase are anticipated. They're a 16th note before beat 1. So the of beat 4 of the previous measure. So 1E and a 2E and a, if you count 16th notes, 4E and a. That's an anticipation, a little bit of syncopation that creates a feeling of forward movement. It's a really great rhythmic device for you to use in your solos. So 4, and this one starts on the 1. So that's a pretty basic bluesy little phrase. It's a nice opening idea to start a solo. It's nice and simple. There's some space between the ideas, and we've got our clear 4 steps. We've got our statement of the motif, development, extension, and resolution. So the second part, second phrase, this would be measures 5 through 8 of the solo, are going to jump up to this position here. So the first phrase was in this position, the second phrase is in this position. We're just kind of following the inversions of the G chord up the neck, and we'll continue that as we go through. So this one is going to start by starting at the 3rd. We're just going to be basically in this position of this G chord here, first inversion G, and we're just going to go from the 3, 5, 6, 1, 6, 5, 3, 5. So 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E. I anticipated that second part of the phrase again. 4E and a 1E and a 2 and a 3. I changed my ending by doing that little bend. So there's my development. My first part is stating the motif. Second part, developing the motif. Third part is going to extend the motif. And I added a few notes, and I went up to a higher note than I had been to before. Doing that little bend from the second to the flat 3. And that kind of bridges. Because there's less space, that's going to bridge me into the fourth part of the phrase, which is my resolution, part 4. So part 1 through 4, here we go. And you might notice that the fourth part, the resolution, has fewer notes. I'm just trying to get to a strong stopping point so that I can feel like I've closed out that phrase and I can move into the next phrase. I'll do the whole thing one more time. 3, 4. Looking at the first phrase I did to the second phrase, there's a little bit more movement, a little bit more development. So I'm stepping forward. I'm trying to create a little more complexity as I go in these phrases. So I'll play phrases 1 and 2 so you can hear those together. So 3, 4. That's my phrase 1 and phrase 2. Now we're going to move to phrase 3. Just like we did before, we're going to invert our shape up the neck. Here we're going to the third of our phrases in this position here, basing it off of G in second inversion. So now our third phrase is going to go like this. I'll play the first part. So it's 3, 4, 1. That's part 1. And that's my motif that I'm going to develop in the next part of the phrase. Next part is this. Starts on the of 4. So that's anticipated again. So 4 and And I stated my motif, and now I developed the motif by doing a different resolution at the end of that part. Going up higher than I did before and landing on a different note. Then part 3 of my phrase is going to be this. I'm starting the exact same way again, but then I'm extending it. And in this case, I'm extending it by adding some notes to the end of the phrase, which lead me into the fourth part of the phrase. So. And that leads me all the way back to beat 1, where I'm going to play the resolution. And in this case, the resolution is not going to be using the same notes. I'm using a completely different note pattern. I'm going to do an arpeggio from C, E, G, C, E. Then I'm bending up to F and then letting it back down to E. So that's my resolution of the phrase. I'll play all 4 of those together. 2, 3, 4. My fourth phrase has a nice way of resolving. I come back to the root note again to keep it simple. I'll play that one more time. And that's my third phrase. Now, I've got the fourth phrase, and this is where we're going to bring in some chordal ideas. So, chordal, meaning using chords. So, I'm going to be doing some hybrid picking here, because when I'm doing chordal stuff, I often like to do hybrid picking when I have nails, which I don't always have nails because I do a lot of work with my hands and I break them all the time. And I really don't like growing them out, but for guitar, it's just so nice to have some fingernails on my right hand because I can get that nice attack. But if you don't have fingernails or you don't do hybrid picking, you can just use your pick for all of the notes. But here's the idea. Here's the first idea. I'll do it nice and slow. So I'm up here. This is 15th fret on the 4th string, 12th fret on the 3rd string, and then 15th fret on the 2nd string. And this is sort of a G7, but without a third. So it's just a flat 7, 1, 5. And I'm going to be keeping these top notes pretty much the same while changing the bottom note to create my motif. So here it is. I'm keeping these two notes the same, so I'm just changing this note down here. I'm going barring with my first finger, and then I'm doing a little slide from the 13th fret into the 14th fret on the 5th string, with these two notes still to make a G major triad. 3, 1, 5. So the idea is that's my motif. So that's my part 1. Part 2, I'm going to develop that motif like this. Starting it the exact same way. And then jumping down to that chord that we ended the first part of the phrase with, but here we're going to do that and then go back up on the bottom of the scale to 5, 6, and then I'm going to switch to 2 notes instead of 3. 15th fret on the 2nd and 3rd string, down to a perfect 5th, the same notes we've been working with previously. So parts 1 and 2 of this phrase. This has a nice funky sound. I really like it. Next, I'm going to extend the phrase. Step 3, extend it. So starting the same way with my motif. So I've started, and then here I'm playing a little G6 chord, going chromatically down, and what this is essentially an E minor triad in first inversion. I've got the notes G, B, E, and when I slide this down, it turns into like essentially the top of a G9 chord. I've got the flat 7, the 2, or the 9, and then the 5th on top. Then I'm going to flatten my pinky to play that G note to end that part of the phrase. So this part of the phrase goes. I'm going to put that together now with the first 2 parts of the phrase, and then we'll get to the resolution. So. Then our resolution is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to go up to a sixth. This B flat and D flat, or the, let's see, 15th, 18th fret on the first and third strings. And I'm just going to go. It's going to go down with those sixths to the 17th fret, and then my basic G major, kind of sixth, B and G here, 15th and 16th fret. And then I'm going to play a C triad, second inversion, all on the 17th fret. And then I'm going to resolve to this nice G9 chord. We've got G on top and then B, then A on the third string, and F on the fourth string. And if I put that over a G, it makes a nice G9. So that's the resolution to my phrase. So if I do this whole phrase together, and that's just an example of how you can use some chords in your soloing using the same phrasing concept. So I'll play the whole thing. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there it is. Now I'll play out the practice tracks. The first one's going to be slower. The second one's going to be faster. So you could work up the speed if you want to. You can always adjust the speed by clicking on the settings and then slowing it down. You can adjust the playback speed if you need it slower, or if you want to try it faster to challenge yourself. That's always an option. So here is the track.